Welcome you to the second Portland Children's Levy Allocation Committee meeting of 2021. I am joined by my colleagues, and go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Hello, I'm Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson.
Hi.
Mitch Horniker.
Mitch.
Felicia
Tracy Rossi. Sorry, Felicia.
Oh, that's okay. Felicia Tripp, County Representative.
Great, we're all here. Count it, all 5 of us. And I'm also joined by the Levy staff. And Meg, you're here filling in today, driving for Lisa, who's on a well-earned vacation. Want to go ahead and introduce the staff?
Sure. I'm Meg McElroy. I'm Assistant Director at the Portland Children's Levy, and I'll kick it to Erka.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Erika Bridgman-Bugnoli, and I'm the Small Grants Fund Manager at the Children's Levy.
We'll pass it to John Kay.
Yeah.
John Kelly, Financial Analyst at the Children's Levy. John Coughlin.
John Coughlin, I'm the Communications Director at the Children's Levy. Hello.
And our newest team member, Joel, will you please introduce yourself and welcome?
Yeah, Joe Broussard, PCO, foster care, and CAFI grant manager.
Welcome aboard, Joel. It's nice to see you. And you come with a lot of experience as a social worker, both in the private and government sectors. And it's great to have your lived experience joining us on the team. So anyway, let's move on to the minutes. Did everyone get a chance to read them? And if so, I go ahead and I move that we approve the minutes from the March 30th meeting. Do I have a second?
Second, this is Felicia.
Thank you, Felicia. And all those in favor, say aye.
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 Hi.
That was beautiful. All right, and that was it. So there's no everyone's in for the minutes. So at this point, we have a chance to listen to public comment on non-agenda items. There will be opportunities to comment on agenda items later in the meeting. Is there anyone on Zoom that is going to raise their hand and is wanting to comment, make a comment on a non-agenda topic? Thought I heard there was one person signed up.
We have a few people signed up to talk about agenda item number 1, but not at this point.
Oh, nothing on non-agenda? Okay, great. Thank you, John C. All right, so we will go ahead and move on then. And we'll kick off the meeting with you, Erika. You're going to give us an update on the Small Grants Fund. Take it away, Erika.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. I'm going to start by sharing my screen here.
Great.
Okay. So I'm going to give just a brief overview of our recommendations to reallocate funds that were declined by one grantee. After completing the full grant process, Native Wellness Institute declined their funding award due to receiving multiple grants, challenges with insurance requirements, and a need to shift programming to COVID response in their communities. This left $144,000 unallocated. And in order to respect the participatory process of the Small Grants Fund, the design team was reconvened. The design team represents half of the full review team, and they had designed as well as participated in the full small grants process. So staff sought their input on options for the remaining funds. In November of 2020, reviewers did not recommend funding 3 of the final 11 applicants. And so staff presented options to the design team for reconsidering funding 1 or more of the unfunded applicants with the remaining $144,000. One of the applicants was removed from consideration because they had scored lowest overall. Of the remaining 2 unfunded applicants, design team considered the following options: requesting revised proposals and funding both unfunded applicants with a smaller amount of funding, funding only one applicant with a full amount, or funding one applicant at a lesser amount and spreading the remaining balance among existing grantees, or setting it aside for renewals at the end of the grant period. The design team recommended redistributing the funds among the existing grantees to bring all grantees as close as possible to their total eligible amounts or their original total funding requests. The design team remarked that robust investment in the small grants fund grantees would allow them to fund all of the components of their programs that the grantees had originally envisioned, and would honor the intention to build capacity in these small organizations. Additionally, they remarked that there was a qualitative difference between the funded and unfunded organizations in step 2, with existing grantees scoring higher in the interview and or application in step 2. So on this slide, you can see the proposed allocations for each grantee. The grantees are listed in score order. Note there was a math error in the memo. The actual proposed amount for Elevate Oregon is $4 more than what appeared in the memo and appears correctly on this slide. No additional funds were proposed for Brown Girl Rise, our smallest award, because they were already very close to their total eligible amount. They were within $717, which seemed too small to do a full contract amendment. So staff approached spreading the funds as evenly as possible, resulting in most applicants receiving their full funding requests or their full total eligible amount based on the PCL policy of not granting more than 30% of the grantee's total revenue. That concludes my presentation, and I can turn it back to you for questions and public comment from the Small Grants Fund grantees.
Great, thank you, Erica. Is there anyone signed up from the public for this item? You said, John, 2 people?
Yes, we have 3 people.
How about if we go ahead and listen to them first before we go into Q&A and discussion? Is that fair?
Should we start with Wendy? Are you ready to go first?
Yeah.
Yes, I
Great.
thought
John,
you
do
said stop.
they have 3 minutes, or is there a time limit on this?
3 minutes, yeah. 3
Okay,
minutes.
and you're managing that?
I will do.
Thank you, John.
Wendy, I'll give you a wave at around 3 minutes, if you can see me.
Can
All right.
Erica
Hi,
unshare the
everyone.
screen?
Okay, hold on. I thought that I had stopped share. It says that I paused.
Pausing isn't the same as stopping, I found out.
I hear you. There you go. Sorry for that.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Soriano Valencia. I'm a family lead at Portland Tennis and Education. So I've been with the organization for about 1.5 years now. I'm, aside from being a family lead at Portland Tennis and Education, I'm also a MSW student at Portland State University. And one of the things that that I have learned over the year is being able to have a social worker on site at our program. Being a social worker myself within 1 year or 2 has allowed me to be able to advocate for my community and for my organization. So one of the things that we have noticed within COVID, outside of COVID, is the trauma that our parents faced within COVID. So not having the opportunity to find family resources, counseling within like our Latinx community, finding their language, having someone who is able to understand within their own language, as well as coming out from COVID, we are reuniting with our families and our kids. It's been about a couple months now that we are able to come slowly back to in-person. So being able to identify how that is doing, we have been noticing how families are trying to engage with us again, how our scholar athletes, our kids are trying to engage with us again. And being able to know that we didn't know how deep the trauma was within COVID and how we can better support them. So being able to have a full-time social worker is going to be really important for all of us, because that way it would be able to provide that advocacy within our parents, but also within our kids, and being able to know that the trauma is there, but we just didn't know how big, and being able to advocate for a social worker to be full-time is going to be able to spend more time within our families and our kids. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I'm glad you were here today. John, who's the next?
And next we have Marisola. Are you ready to go?
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. My name is Marisela de Jesus Martinez. I have 2 children in Portland Tennis and Education. Stephanie, who's 14 years old, and that she has attended Portland Tennis and Education for about 6 years now. And Hassel will be joining the program during the summer. So he's 5 and she's 14. I want to talk about my experience. Have been a parent of children attending Portland Tennis and Education. It is a program that is a big part of our lives. I recently heard that the possibility that the high school academy was expanding its and rethinking its shape and its structure. And I am excited about this opportunity to see the possible ways that PT&E can support our children. We don't know, we have no idea of the impact that we can create in our children's lives until we see programs like this one become alive and be successful and make our children successful. I am excited about this possible opportunity for the teens that recently suffered from the pandemic. Recently, because of the pandemic, my family and other families have suffered complications. Stephanie had a major eating problem and depression, part of the pandemic. And staff and coaches at Portland Tennis and Education have supported us endlessly. I have been so grateful to be part of this family and to have PT&E during the most difficult times. And for me to see my daughter become better and better each day as life goes back to its normality, including attending to Portland Tennis and Education physically, cannot be measured. It can only be experienced. And for my daughter to smile back again and being able to move, get out of bed and just be part of what she was before, it's countless. I cannot emphasize enough about the need to have these programs in place and for the children that would have the opportunity to have this program in place, to have for the children, that wouldn't have this opportunity otherwise. PT&E is a program that supports low-income families and diverse families. After all, this is what we want in our community. We want equality for everyone that is part of it. I strongly agree that everyone in the community shapes our children, and to have the responsibility to help build these strong communities, it's very important. PT&E helps support shapes lives academically and physically, building strong children in an environment that it's friendly, diverse, and thoughtful for them. PT&E, I think it identifies and reinforces their skills to help the children's success in school and in life. And as a last thought, I really hope that you can enable this opportunity for them to make a difference in these children's lives, and putting money towards programs like PT&E that helps supports our children is the best investment that you can ever make towards the community that you belong.
Thank you, Ms. De Jesus, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else signed up, John?
We do. Ashley, are you ready to go? Ashley just joined us.
Oh, great.
So she might be getting her microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Good. Thanks, John. Yeah, I was just wanting to say a brief testimony for Urban Gleaners. We are one of the small grant recipients this year. And to the allocation committee, hopefully you guys can learn more about the small organizations that you're supporting at Urban Gleaners. This year alone, we're feeding about 4,000 to 5,000 local people every week with really fresh, healthy, wholesome, nutritious food. We do that for free. We require no proof of need, no proof of identification. Anyone is welcome in the community. And particularly, we are delivering this food to schools and school sites where we can reach a lot of children who are in need. There's a lot of children in need of food in Portland, unfortunately, and the more services they can get to get the basic needs covered for them feels really important right now, especially in a time with a lot of families really struggling now that school's out for the summer. Any free meals they received at school are no longer available to them. And so this time of year especially is really critical for kids. They need food at home. Their families need help putting enough food on the table for them. And so we're able to do that and help supplement for families. This year alone, even during a pandemic and our food numbers are down, our food donations are down by about 50%. We've provided more than 315,000 really high quality, nutritious meals to families for free. And it's really just helps in a small bit to families when they're really struggling and working really hard. And we are really excited to be partnering with PCL this year. It's a large grant for us. And so it would be really fantastic for it to be even more, and it would help us do our job more easily as well. So thank you. Thanks, John, for figuring out my technical issues too. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hess. John, does that conclude our testimony from our small grant recipients? Okay. So now's the time for any questions of Erica before we go on to vote on this on these additional grants, monies for these grant recipients. Any questions for Erica? Okay, seeing none, I think that's probably a good sign. Erica, what I'll go ahead and do is go ahead and ask for the vote. You can make a comment then. I'll just go who's on my screen. So hello, Tracy. You want to go first? We're voting to approve the additional monies for the small grants.
Yes, I approve.
Was I supposed to do a second before we went on to the vote? Probably, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Thanks for doing that second, Tracy.
Yeah, I'll do the second.
Thanks. Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Felicia Tripp.
Aye.
And Mitch Horniker.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. And I just want to say how wonderful it was to have the testimony, especially from the mother. And I'm thinking about your daughter, Stephanie, right now. I vote aye. Okay, Erica, is that it?
That is it. And thank you for that. I'm delighted to be able to give the grantees a chance to speak. And these were the ones that were available today, but hopefully in the future, you'll be able to hear more from some of the others as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Erica. Next up, we have Meg, who will give us some background before we introduce our guest speakers. Meg, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner Ryan. So back when we received, in 2019, when we received recommendations through our community engagement work with Empress Rules Equity Consulting and from Portland State University in our grant making improvement effort, both of them suggested that we as staff do increase our ability to help grantees build relationships with the allocation committee. And so as part of our commitment to taking that recommendation to heart, we are trying to make as a feature of our allocation committee meetings a standing item where grantees get to come and share about their experiences right now in the field. And given the particular year we've been having, this seemed ever more important for us to do. I also want to take a quick minute to apologize for an error. In putting this element of the agenda together, we managed to only communicate with grantees in 2 program areas, after school and hunger relief. And we had a lot of interest in folks who wanted to speak, but we managed to inadvertently leave out the other 4 program areas. So as we go forward, we'll be sure to continue to reach out to everyone. And our intent is to have all grantees have this opportunity to speak with you. So I will turn it back over to Commissioner Ryan, who will introduce each of the 4 organizations and programs and the staff who have come to speak with you today. Thanks.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you so much. And I'm really happy, and I'm sure I speak for everyone, that we have this opportunity to listen and do dialogue with the recipients. First up is Jenny Selza, you're with the Sun Initiative and Hunger Relief Supervisor with Erko, with Immigration, Refugee, and Community Organization Hunger Relief Program. I did that backwards. I got to the where you work at the end. Anyway, welcome, Jenny, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us an opportunity to come and present today. We're excited about this. As you said, my name is Jenny Selza. I'm the Hunger Relief Program Supervisor for Erko. And I'm joined today by two of my colleagues. So I'm going to give them a quick moment to introduce themselves. Utisa, do you want to go?
Yes, hi, my name is Utisa Abdullah. I am the P3 Resource Navigator at Sacramento Elementary.
And my name is Jacqueline McDougall, and I am the P3 Resource Navigator at Ventura Park Elementary School in David Douglas District.
So Erko's Hunger Relief Program supports 6 school communities across 4 different school districts in all of East County. One major component of our Hunger Relief Program is working closely with the school-based family resource navigators like Jacqui and Utisa. And those staff really help us identify and enroll these families, which has helped us retain our ability to collect sort of data and demographics on the families we're serving in a way that other programs may not have been able to do during this time. So that's been a success for us. The collaboration with them has helped us serve. Currently, 66% of our clients are from BIPOC or immigrant and refugee communities. 41% of our clients speak a language other than English in their homes. So we really feel like we're reaching and connecting with communities that are at highest need during this time. Pre-pandemic, our services were focused around like a backpack program that a student brought home food, but we've adapted that during this time so that now we're providing food boxes that serve the whole family, which has really been a great change, I'll say, to our program and has really helped support our families. Through the continuous effort with the resource coordinators, Jacqui and Utisa, we've learned about additional supports that the families need during this pandemic, and we're able to meet them more where they're at, rather than just sending food home on a school bus. And that's why I've invited Jacqui and Utisa to speak today about their experience really doing the work. So I'm going to hand it over to Jacqui. You're muted.
Sorry. So we have been surveying families in the school and their respective culture to be culturally responsive and specific to identify the family's needs based on the foods that they typically eat in their home, based on the foods that they cannot eat due to their culture and their religion. So we have been able to actually shop for those families based on the needs that they were able to tell us that they had. What I like to call is kid-friendly food. We have also been able to have the capacity to shop for food that takes very, very low parent supervision for these kids to be able to eat, because during the day and during the time, parents are always not available or may not be in the home. So we get things like noodles and ravioli, lunch meats and sandwiches, so that families are able, or the kids are able to make these lunches on their own accord. We have been shopping for fresh ingredients because we know that that is a real strong thing, and a lot of our families have not had the means to go to the grocery store due to this pandemic and fear for being around people and shopping. So being able to obtain fresh fruit and fresh ingredients has been a very good, valuable thing that we have been able to have. We are right now providing families each month with about 42 to 50 pounds of food. And we are able to pack this food for them in our school with our support and get these food to this family. So these families, the food that we're receiving, that 50 pounds, looks to be what we hope to be about a month's worth of food to help supplement whatever other areas that we're getting. So the focus is just really being able to be culturally responsive and making sure that we are giving the families food that they are actually going to eat, opposed to food that they need but probably won't eat due to their religious and cultural beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqui. And in addition to these culturally specific food boxes, one of the challenges that we had faced was transportation. The data that we was able to collect through surveys allowed us to prioritize our staffing. We intentionally wanted our 4 Somali mom to feel comfortable when the driver pulled up that spoke their language, or our 6 drivers our driver that came to our Slavic community could have been a familiar face from church due to religion. We wanted our Latinx families to feel happy and able to explain or ask questions, and somebody was there and able to answer a question for them that spoke their language. And finally, our 5 African-American family, when a driver pulled up that shared the same culture as they did, then they felt more comfortable asking and reaching out to us for food and being more, just accepted. They when they seen others come looking like them, it was, it feels good. So being able to support and provide these families with these culturally specific food boxes and allowing us to be able to support staffing, to have drivers to be able to deliver these food boxes to these families have been just wonderful. Thank you.
So, there's 2 testimonies, 2 separate sites, 2 elementary schools, from the women who are doing the work and helping connect these families with the food they need, providing the cultural food boxes or dietary food boxes that the families need, as well as we have started offering this home delivery, as Utisa was talking about, for the families who are experiencing barriers to food access. If they can't get there through transportation, if they have a medical need or have been asked to quarantine at home, if they have young children at home, some who are maybe in CDL, distance learning, they aren't able to get out and go get the food or access some of these other locations. So we've really adapted our services in those ways now to best meet the families that we're at, where they're at. One of the challenges that we have seen, or really just increased work level, is around how are we collecting this data? It's the wellness checks, it's the one-on-one phone calls with the families. This isn't the data that shows up in the counts that you see on the reports. This isn't how many clients served and what are their demographics, but what are their individual needs? And that's really where the work is happening. And that's the part that we happens in a narrative, but doesn't necessarily get captured in the counts that get reported to you. So that's, our presentation. Thank you again. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll open the floor up for any questions. So great to have you here and your partners with Erko. Anyone have any questions? Felicia, that's more of applause, right? Applause is good. I'll start off with one. Listening to your testimony is just a reminder of how we've adapted during COVID, and we're learning some new practices when you hear things about meeting people where they are, getting more information about what food would actually be culturally appropriate, although I think it might be a little universal, the kid-friendly food. I just was really taken with the testimony. So no one knows what normal is anymore, but when we have school going back in session, which I think every parent's excited about, are some of these practices and adaptations that you've learned this past year going to be continuing, and maybe not having food boxes on school buses like I heard earlier?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think some of the lessons we've learned and the ways that we've been able to better serve the communities we already were serving, we will continue. We've now developed the relationships with some of these families. So obviously we have the information on their needs, but we've also developed systems that will help us expand those services as new families come in. So we have questionnaires, we have phone calls in home languages to go through, what are your food preferences? Are there any specific dietary needs of your students or the older adults in the home? Many of these families are multi-generational. So they mentioned kid-friendly food, but we're also trying to provide food that is appealing to everybody who's going to be eating it. So that's where the fresh produce really comes in. That's an opportunity for families to share around recipes and things like that as well.
Awesome. Sorry, I was a little taken with you. TISA seems to be live at Sacramento Elementary. connecting with
They-
family. It was quite riveting to watch. She just suddenly froze. Yeah, there she is.
They are both at fifth grade and kindergarten promotions today. So
Oh.
they took a moment away to
How
join you.
exciting. Yay, right? Yay. Promotion time. Okay, any other questions from the group? We have celebration emojis showing up on the screen. Hearts, yeah. All right. Okay, well, thank you so much, Jenny. And thank you so much, Utisa. It's really been fun to watch you with the community at Sacramento Elementary. I think, should we go on to the next one? Meg? Okay.
Yes, please. That sounds great.
All right. Bye, Erko. So do you want to take it away, Meg, and introduce the next group?
Oh, sure. From Neighborhood House's Mobile Food Pantry, we have Jim Cooper. Take it away, Jim.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I run the Neighborhood House Food Pantry, which is located in Multnomah Village. It's a shopping style pantry, or was, before COVID happened. So when we applied for this grant, the whole idea was to help bring food to people who were experiencing different kinds of barriers to making it into the pantry, whether it's transportational or having, you know, a number of kids they would have to bring along, that sort of thing. And so we identified a couple of apartment complexes that we were going to target, and then use that as the starting point to deliver food boxes on site. Then COVID happened several months before this plan went into action. And so we had to close the pantry for on site, and we switched to an all delivery model 3 months before I had any idea that we were going to be doing this. So all these ideas I had in my head that weren't quite plans yet just had to be implemented almost overnight. The good part of that is that it allowed us to work out some of the bugs before the beginning of the fiscal year even started. On the other hand, we were a little bit cart before the horse as well. But that was just the nature of this last year. We had a little difficulty establishing clientele at the beginning, partly because of COVID and not being able to be face-to-face. So we did some Zoom meetings with tenants at these apartment complexes. We cultivated another group of people when we realized that we're going to need even more clients than the ones that we had. And so we also partnered with the Hackey community, which is primarily a Somali clients. And so we started delivering food to them as well. We had to do a few things really fast. We had to get our hands on a van. I had to hire somebody to manage this thing. And so that actually took a pretty good chunk of the summer to work through all those bugs. I had a original hire that didn't work out. And so it wasn't until last fall that I got somebody on board who's really, really killing it. Is just amazing person who I probably should have brought to this meeting, but we'll definitely come to the next one. Some of the other issues that we dealt with over the last year included food supply. We worked with the Oregon Food Bank, and if anybody here has worked with them in the last year, you know at the beginning of COVID, suddenly the available food dropped off precipitously. And so we had to find other means of getting food. We were able to get some cash to go buy food from other places, partly from the food bank. And it never got so bad that we weren't able to provide enough food for people. Mostly it was a matter of variety. There were certain things that were hard to get a hold of. That has stabilized since then. But that was one of the difficulties in the last year. And having enough clients that we've discovered in the sites that we've identified has also been an issue. So in the next year, we're hoping to expand the program. We've already been cultivating several other sites that are part of Home Forward, which is the organization that we've been working with. We have doubled the number of clients with the Hackey community. So we really feel like this first year was a bit of a trial run so we could get all the pieces in place in order to really knock it out of the park next year. But some of the things that we've done that work really great is we have an online form for people to sign up and to order food and to tell us what their preferences are so that we can do our best to provide culturally and dietary selections that people have. And we have I mean, it's only one small piece of what we did, and I don't want to get into too much of the other thing, but all of it was delivery. You know, instead of one little piece of it being us delivering for this grant, we were delivering food all over town, because it was really a triage situation. As some of you know, we were just getting food to people any way that we could, as quickly as we could, and the grant really was just part of it, as opposed to this standalone thing that I'd envisioned. Now that things are stabilizing, we're getting ready to open up our pantry again, and the delivery model will be almost totally the PCL. We're going to keep one little piece of it for seniors and stuff too, with volunteer drivers. But this next year, we're really expecting to do a lot more than we did in the last year. You know, COVID had some mixed blessings in it, because it allowed us to work out some things, you know, very quickly and very efficiently that may have taken longer if we hadn't. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for being here. Let's open it up to the group.
I have a question. Thanks so much, Jim, for your presentation. I know that Erko mentioned that food donations were down about 50%, and I just wondered if you all had encountered any difficulty making sure that everyone got food deliveries that needed them.
We were able to give food to anybody who asked for it. And part of the reason is because the community really came together. So whatever we weren't able to get through the food bank, the community made up for it. We had food drives, cash donations were up, people wanting to volunteer were up. We couldn't even use all the people that were wanting to volunteer. Everybody wanted to help. Now that was more at the beginning, and it's kind of waned as time has passed. But interest is still strong, and now the food supply is strong, and everything's really looking good going into the next fiscal year.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Anyone else on the committee like to ask Jim a question? Yes, Felicia.
Jim, you were saying that it was difficult to attract clients at times this year. Do you have a plan for outreach that is different from this year going into the new year?
Yeah, the biggest part of my plan is actually our delivery coordinator, who has been able to, because earlier the onus was on me, so on top of everything else, I was also doing that. Now I've got somebody who's dedicated to it, and she's already done a great job so far of getting us a lot more people to bring food to, including cultivating these other sites. And that's probably the biggest thing that has changed. And also we can go face-to-face more. You know, we've been going on site and distributing flyers and stuff. We weren't even comfortable doing that, you know, a year ago.
Jim, you mentioned that now that things are, you know, settling down, and that people would be coming to the pantry again, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the case? Yeah. And then you also said that you've been delivering food all over town. Yeah. So how are you adapting to knowing that your reach perhaps is pretty large across the city? Mm-hmm. And then the model might adapt, although you did mention to Felicia how you're going to focus on delivery as well. Anyway, I just want to hear how you're adapting to that need of reaching your clients all over town and maybe not having as many come to your location.
Well, we're pivoting at this moment. Actually, in July, we're going to start allowing clients back inside the pantry again. And as we do that, we're going to scale back the delivery. When the emergency was really, really bad, our delivery area was just as far as we could get people to go. And now that things are settling down, we're retracting that a little bit, because there are pantries and there are resources in other parts of town. We don't have to stretch out that far. Mm-hmm. And we're focusing more on the southwest area again, a little bit into the east side, but not, we were going pretty deep into the east side before. And in the last month, knowing that this stuff was going to happen, we've been letting clients know when they order boxes that these changes were going to occur. And there are benefits to coming to the pantry, you know, for people that can. They can get more food, they can choose their food, so there's less of likelihood of them getting food they're not going to want, you know, that kind of thing. So hopefully it'll even out. But we've gotten the word out and let people know.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to have that dialogue. Thanks. You're really adapting. It's wonderful to listen to that. Any other questions before we go on to the next guest? Okay, Jim, thank you for being here and representing the neighborhood house.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, the next speaker we have, or the next guest, is Dr. Tong. You're the executive director, right, with Oregon Mesa. Welcome, Dr. Jang.
Thank you so much for inviting me today, and just really grateful for the opportunity to speak. My name is Tong, and I'm the executive director of Mesa. Mesa is a program that has been based at Portland State since 1985, and we're working to advance equity in the STEM fields through hands-on after-school programming for underrepresented students. So in a typical year, we train formal math and science teachers with partner schools to deliver programming in the school building after school. The students are usually working on invention projects that require anywhere from prototyping to soldering to 3D printing. We have in-person hands-on competitions, family STEM nights, and college and career on-site activities. I'm saying all this to show that none of this was possible this last year. So since March of 2020, we've had to do things drastically different than what we normally do. Last summer was definitely a challenge. So we work with schools in the city of Portland, Portland Public Schools, Park Grove School Districts, and pretty much most of the school districts in the city of Portland. But we also work with 13 total school districts in the state. And that means we were meeting with districts like monthly to gauge what the 2020 and 2021 school year would be like. And I think that answer was changing like weekly from what they were thinking about doing. So we decided about midsummer last year that everything would be virtual. So we had a curriculum team work really hard to create a virtual ready curriculum that was easier for teachers to execute online, and also added additional supports for English language learners because we knew that those kind of supports would be harder in a virtual environment. The biggest challenge has been, like the previous guests and grantees have already mentioned, supply distribution. So over the last year, our individual homes, because we were not allowed to go onto campus, has become distribution and packing centers. My personal contribution is I collated 500 packages of pipe cleaners. We've shipped items directly to students. We've worked with teachers to do that. We even had a staff member rent a U-Haul so that she could drive around town dropping off supplies. I'm sure other people are very familiar with these things. Students got prototyping materials, microcontrollers, laptops if they needed it, and supplies specific to our competitions. The process was about as smooth as it could be, but we definitely had packages stolen, students who floated between homes. It was hard to get addresses. Overall, we were able to get everyone what they needed, but definitely challenging in terms of getting everything that. To support that, we had a team of multilingual community liaisons who made over 1,000 phone calls directly to families to recruit them for activities, enroll students into our programs, and just to check in. That was also difficult because last year was an election year. And so overall, there was just an increase in spam calls, election calls, everything. And so we had a lot of our phone calls screened out by families. So then we added a text system. So that actually did really help a lot to get directly to families. So we started mass texting people so we could at least get the information out. We also added invention clubs so that we could have informal educators step in where teachers were overwhelmed. So we could still do Mesa for students, even if it wasn't technically based at the school. But the overwhelming good news was that we pulled it off. We served over 120 students in the city of Portland. That enrollment's about 40 to 50% less than what we expected in a normal year. We were able to reach, however, a higher percentage of students of color. So over 70% of our students were BIPOC this year, and we reached a higher percentage of low-income students. For instance, compared to last year we only had 13% of our students in the city of Portland identify as Black. This year, 25% of our students identified as Black. This was something we were worried about as we were going into taking our program online because we were afraid that we wouldn't be able to reach students of color or low-income students as effectively, but we worked with a lot of families and community partners. So we were able to recruit students from our priority populations. We also made just general events accessible to past participants. So if they didn't have an active Mesa chapter, they could still participate on virtual college and career visits, our STEM coaching program, and even our Mesa Day competition. And overall, the feedback has been pretty positive. It was obviously exhausting, but the students reported that they've been having fun in Mesa, that even though they've been online an additional time, and it's been about 90 minutes for each of the sessions and they're weekly, students have actually been saying that it's the right amount of time and that sometimes the sessions were too short. and that they reported that it was easy to join. So just a small snippet of what one of the students said. They said that my favorite part of being in this Mesa chapter is hang out with some of my best friends and making and building things. And I know that's really simple, but that's one of the things that the students have really been missing out in this last year is the social environment and being able to actually work on things with other students. So we're really excited about being able to go back into person. Next year, we're going to take some of the things that we actually learned this year and continue them. So some new programs like potentially continuing on with invention clubs and continuing on with a STEM career coaching program, which is something that was new this last year. But yeah, that is the end of my testimony. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tong. Anyone on the committee like to ask a question? Comments?
I just want to say what a great program, any program we could have kids during this unique year. So Tong, I really commend Mesa and the creativity you went to meet our young kids where they're for Mesa, what is the out of the 120 kids that you had last year, what age group was your largest demographic?
Yeah, middle school. So around 7th and 8th was definitely the biggest group of students that we had.
Nice. And Tong, now that makes me even want to reflect more on one of your comments you made. Did you say 90 minutes? It was not enough time for middle schoolers to be in a Zoom engagement?
Yeah, that was actually something so a lot of middle schoolers were very lonely this last year.
Yeah.
And obviously not the case for all students, but the students that was the thing that they really enjoyed was actually being in a more unstructured environment where they could actually talk in a smaller group with other students and start working on things and things like that. And I think that's what they really appreciated.
Thank you. That's a wonderful testimony right there.
Yeah.
That outreach. Yeah, Mitch.
Yeah, thanks, Tong. Some of the things that you did and actually turned out better than planned were solely related to distance and COVID. But it sounds like you also learned some things that you might be able to take forward, including your wonderful outcomes with BIPOC participation. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so for some time we've been working with schools directly just based on school demographics. So we work with schools that more than half of the students there qualify for free and reduced lunch, and that's how we select school partners. And we've been hearing from partners in the past that there's communities where the schools don't necessarily fit, but there's still communities of color that that obviously students go to different schools. So the Invention Club is a community-based model. So we actually work with other organizations where they support us with recruiting students directly, like BIPOC students into those programs. And that was something we were able to pilot this last year. We've been thinking about it for some time, and then this year was just the opportunity to do so. So that's definitely something. It's not going to be our core model, but definitely for neighborhoods and communities that need it, it's something we're going to keep doing.
Is Invention Club targeted to the middle school students, or is it to all your participants?
It's all of our participants. If they don't have a Mesa at their school, it's what we're hoping to be able to provide for them.
Cool.
I have to say, I'm a huge fan of Mesa. I came from the tech industry before I got involved in politics, and was just, I just love hearing about this program and the way that you've been able to persevere. And as a mom of middle schoolers, I think like keeping kids engaged for 90 minutes on Zoom is a huge accomplishment. So congratulations for that. And I know I filmed a video, I think it was like last month or a couple months ago, for the graduation for the students. And so that was great. So I hope they're all really proud of the work that they did. And it's been great to hear about the program and how you guys have been able to pivot and make it flourish during this past year.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that.
Hi, nice to see you. I do have a question, and I am in awe of the middle school engagement. I think we all are like, that's amazing. I also wonder, because the youth were at home, if you were able to gauge that there was any family engagement or just more recognition of Mesa from a family perspective because they were at home and you all were in their computer screens, on their computer screens?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So our theme actually for this year for our client, the invention theme was La Familia. So they actually chose someone from their family to interview and design a product for. So I think that helped a little bit with the family connections too. And we did family nights that were virtual. It was almost like kind of TV shows. We did actually quite a few of the family nights that were broadcast for a lot of families. So I think it was I think it's a really great opportunity to engage the families more because we usually, there is a lot more logistics of bringing families to events. We do that a lot, but it was, I think, a good opportunity to better engage the families.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tong, for being here. It's wonderful to do dialogue with you. And we're getting hearts, emojis, and anyway, the fanfare continues. Now we have Sarasi Rodriguez from the Youth and Family Engagement Program Manager from El Programa Hispano Católico. Welcome, and we're so excited to hear what you have to say.
Hi, Dan, and hello, everyone else. So my name is Sarai Rodriguez. I'm from El Programa Hispano Program Manager there for the last 3 years. And it's just so great hearing all the stories and all the work that everyone is doing. It's just a huge reminder of why we're in this work. And I always tell people and my friends, like, I'm not in this work for a paycheck. I'm in this work because this is not really considered work. This is just helping and building our community to just be better. So it's just really awesome to be able to continue hearing all the amazing work that is happening throughout our communities. At El Programa Hispano, this was our first year with this grant. And so like everyone else, we had amazing plans of connecting our youth to different programs and opportunities. And so the program that we do is we do mentoring in the middle school and high school. And for this program specifically is in the David Douglas School District. And we came in hoping to obviously recruit students and be able to do some mentoring in person. Usually what it looks like is having 3 days at the high school and 2 days at the middle school, being able to work alongside those two different youth groups. One, the high schoolers is really, connecting them to opportunities, connecting them to volunteering, connecting them to leadership opportunities in their school and in their community. And the middle schools is being able to build that transition into high school before it actually happens. And a big part of the work that is usually being done with our mentoring is being able to connect with the teachers and the counselors and admin at the schools, and in that way being able to engage with the academic challenges that some of our youth are having. And so we do serve 100% Latino youth in our programs at El Programa Hispano. All of our staff are actually 100% bilingual in Spanish and English at El Programa Hispano as well. So our youth advocates are also bilingual with our students as well. So during this pandemic, things changed and we had to shift it up a little bit. And we've all heard of screen exhaustion, right? I'm screen exhausted as well, just as a worker. So I can't even imagine how difficult it's been for our youth. And it's so amazing hearing from Mesa as well. I know my daughter has participated in Mesa in the past, in person, of course. But one of the biggest issues that we did see was screen exhaustion. And so even though our programs are not necessarily academic based, we're still connecting with youth and we're still trying to engage with them. And so retention of youth was a big challenge. Recruiting youth during this time was definitely difficult because usually our recruitment comes in person. We usually send our youth advocates into the lunchrooms. They're usually hanging out, during recess. They usually come and talk, in several classrooms, or they connect directly with the counselors. And so being able to recruit students during this time has really been a very difficult challenge. Apart from that was also collecting packets. So collecting our general intake forms for the organization. And sometimes we also partner with SUN. So being able to do SUN intake forms and our general forms in our organization was also challenging. We had to actually purchase the waterproof envelopes. And what we did is to some of our participants for their families is we dropped off packets in these waterproof envelopes and then let them know that they were there. And then would schedule a pickup time for them. Of course, that was also challenging. As you can imagine, sometimes we pick up our mail and we open it, and sometimes we don't, right? So that's one of the issues that we came upon. But we are able to see some youth. We did have about 25 youth that did enroll, but slowly some of them started dropping off. I believe right now we're at 16 youth that we've been able to. We continued recruiting them, but it's just been such a challenge with youth not wanting to be so engaged in virtual. Everything has been virtual with all of our youth for this past year. And I think just that thought of having to do another thing virtual is kind of daunting. So we were able to do some in-person classes in April, which was really exciting. We were able to go to the park. We did have some activities scheduled and field trips, and then the districts shut us down. We were unable to do any more in-person stuff because students were back in the building, and there was no way for tracking. Because of COVID, there was no way of contact tracking with our youth. And so partners were not able to see youth in person anymore. So that was definitely a bummer. A lot of our field trips that we had planned, we had to cancel, get refunded. We usually do college visits with all of our high schoolers and our middle schoolers as well. We were unable to do any of those college visits. We do bring opportunities. We do bring speakers from different programs. So there's a lot of youth that were interested in nursing programs. So we brought speakers from different nursing programs, and they did talk about how to sign up, how long a nursing program is. We were able to do that with a few different trade programs is what we've been able to do, and some colleges. Some folks were able to come in and talk about different colleges and different experiences and how to apply for FAFSA or how to get into some early opportunities for that. But it has definitely been challenging. Volunteering, we usually help youth get connected to volunteering opportunities. That was also difficult because a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, a lot of places were not receiving any volunteers during the time. We did connect them to some of our food pantries though, because we also have some food pantries at El Programa Hispano. So they were able to get some volunteer opportunities through that, especially for our seniors that maybe needed to finish up some of those volunteer hours in order to graduate. Besides the challenges and this crazy time, the positives I would say is being able to build these relationships with these students. I think that's something, if we're still building relationships when we're in person, but from our youth advocates, from the way that they explain it, it was a deeper connection that they were able to build during this time, because like some of you have mentioned, they're lonely. There was a lot of trauma. There's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of mental health issues going on with a lot of our youth, and a lot of the one-on-one connection that our youth advocates were able to do that sometimes is not possible to do at the school setting was a lot greater than sometimes doing an activity together. So being able to not just create a relationship with the youth, but also with the family. Our family advocate has been doing in-person. It's weird having to say in person. That's like a new normal, right? It's having to say in person. But they've been able to do in-person parent groups since March at our organization. We were able to finally have participants in our organization. And these families have just been overwhelmed by how much support, emotional, financial support that we've been able to provide in the last few months. We're currently doing a workshop with these families, and we have families, we can only have 10 families at a time in the building, and we just have so much interest right now because we're doing some mental health and drug and alcohol counseling workshops with these families that just were in dire need of this connection, not just to each other, but to how to better their own parenting skills and how to better the livelihood of their own youth as well. So it's just been really amazing. Although doing everything virtual is an issue, it's also nice that we can now understand that we could do some stuff virtual for some families that maybe don't have the time to go to a workshop in person, or a youth that maybe can't stay after school right away because they have to go take care of some of their siblings, but they can join a meeting maybe later on in the evening virtually. So I believe going forward, something that we would like to continue is to continue to provide some type of virtual activities or groups for our youth and our parents that we haven't been able to reach in the past. I've been working with Sun I worked with Sun for 12 years, and it was not something that we ever thought about, right? Well, there's students that we can't reach. We just can't reach them. So, oh, well, like they just can't stay after school. They've been taking care of their siblings. There's no one really watching out for them. But now there's this great opportunity where we can build virtual relationships with them now. And it's another tool that we can use. One of the last things that I would like to say is the greatest things that I saw is we do a lot of kits. So like a lot of activity kits. We did cooking. We brought some like professional chefs to do workshops with our students, and they did it with their families. And so we provided the food for their whole family to be able to do the activity. Now, not all families were able to participate in it, but some of them were. We got pictures, and we were able to see through the video, that our families also learned a different meal, and they were partaking in building this relationship with their youth as well. And that's not something we can normally do, that we've done in the past. So that is also a welcoming change that, again, we would like to continue going forward as well. And that is it. If you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Sarani. Questions from the committee or comments? Yes, Mitch.
Thank you so much for what you're doing. I'm thinking about these kids for all except for the seniors. There's another year coming when hopefully we're back to normal. How are you thinking about that group of kids that, like college connection, and lots of times that's a whole family experience and an endeavor to get a first generation kid to community college or four-year school or even vocational. Are you thinking about how you might be able to go back and recapture kids that just missed just because of bad time to be a senior?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of our families that are in these parent groups. That was one of the things that they questioned is how do we connect our youth to some of these colleges that we don't really know how to do, or we don't know how to do FAFSA, or we don't know what is really out there. So our family advocator is actually already doing that work. He's already meeting one-on-one with our families. And we want to continue doing like continuous workshops with families on, okay, we're gonna have a couple families at a time. We're gonna talk about these colleges, or we don't just focus on colleges either. We also focus on trade schools. We focus on programs and different opportunities, because college isn't for everyone. It's great when it's for some, but there's some families that, especially in our Latino culture, we're really pushed on working and like building skills and creating a family. And so that's where we try to push a little bit of, well, you can do nurturing programs. You could do, these trade schools that pay really great, but parents don't know about that. So we would like to continue these like one-stop workshops where we can just invite families and students together and continue speaking to them. But we are supporting the seniors at this time with some of those workshops already.
Anyone else? I just wanted to acknowledge your comments about the virtual choice was so helpful, especially reaching some of the youth and families that were isolated because they were lonely. So like the other presenters, do you see this will adapt to your program going forward? Will it probably always be more of a hybrid or no? What do you think?
I think including some type of virtual, maybe not fully, because we are seeing the longing for connection with our youth, but still wanting to provide at least once a month of doing something virtual, or as maybe like a needs basis.
Yeah, because really I misspoke. So really they needed connection was the main point, and virtual is all you had. But anyway, I'm just overwhelmed and with all of the presenters and the themes that we've heard today, and all of it was about resilience and adaptability. So thank you so much for representing El Programa. And if there's no other questions, I just want to ask Erko if there's anything else you'd like to add, or Meg, before we move on.
No, I just want to say thanks again to all of them for taking the time to be here today. We really appreciate it.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Next, Meg will give us an update on the training and technical assistance offered by the Levy.
Yes. And I just want to say to Jim and Jenny and anyone else and Sarai who's still on the call, you are welcome to stay for as long as you'd like, but you are also not obligated. So just in case you have other things to do this afternoon. And for the rest of us in this meeting, so there are 3 things left on our agenda. The next one, the training and technical assistance update, I'm going to try to get through pretty quickly, because the other 2 items, I want to leave enough time for a little bit of discussion among you all. I don't intend to do much talking. I'm hoping to invite some conversation. So with that.
And I think it's great we ran over on that one. It was so nice to have the interaction with the recipients.
Yeah, and the agenda wasn't the 2 full hours as planned, because we had a feeling that that particular item might run. Right. And so we left lots of time. So I think we're in good shape. But thank you for that, Commissioner. So training and technical assistance with grantee partners, just a reminder that in November 2019, when you all made decisions about apportioning the projected revenue for this levy period, you at that time set aside $1 million toward training and technical assistance over 3 years with PCL grantees. And staff had intended to come back to you with a training plan after the grant making round was done, but of course the pandemic interrupted that, and we put a pause on all of that, in large part because we were cautious about what the revenue projections would be with pandemic impacts. But what we heard this spring and what we briefed you on in March is that the city economist has shown projections that should have little challenge covering all of our grants, as well as that $1 million set aside for training and technical assistance. So we are excited to be able to start moving forward with those plans. We just concluded a survey with grantees to elicit their input on training needs and priorities, and 61 out of 85 of our large grantees responded to that survey as of Wednesday. I've had a couple more responses trickle in since then, and that's last Wednesday. And Erko's already been working with the small grantees to identify their needs. So altogether, we're getting input from the whole bunch. Just to give you a snapshot, big themes that had come out of the survey so far, and this is just very preliminary analysis. We have to dig deeper to get to the specifics, but grantees have highly prioritized trauma-informed care training, equity, diversity, and inclusion training, youth development practices, evaluating program impact, child brain development and parenting, and the role of culture and mentoring. They have called out some specific things in each of those categories, and a couple of other things that they mentioned quite frequently in their responses was making sure that the trainings that we provide, the folks that we hire to do training, the consultants, are culturally relevant, including offering training in Spanish. And grantees are interested in not just one-time workshops, but also series. They kind of want a range of options. So we as a staff will dig deeper into those data to analyze them. We're going to iterate the input from grantees a little bit more, and then formulate some plans and come back to you all in the fall with a preliminary plan with things like topics, maybe training and consultant folks, like ideas of folks we want to potentially hire, and then some costs. Any questions about that? Okay, I didn't answer.
Thank you, Meg. I know we all look forward to seeing how that input will change the workshops going forward.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okie doke. So the next item on the agenda, the next 2 items are more conversational, I hope, for you all. I'm going to set the stage a little bit and then invite some reflections, if that sounds good. So the next item is around increasing how PCL uses participatory processes in its work. When we had Empress Rules Equity Consulting do our community engagement process and the Portland State University team do our grant making improvement report back in 2019, both of those reports included several recommendations around changing our practices. And both of them held in common the suggestion of having the levy create an advisory committee. In community engagement, the suggestion there was to have the committee look at methods and best practices for the Portland Children's Levy to connect with the community and to take concrete steps toward ending historical inequities, including providing support with achieving outcomes, funding recommendations, and holding the levy accountable. So that was sort of what the community engagement recommendation set a role for an advisory committee could be. The PSU grant making improvement report team suggested that an advisory committee could increase community voice and representation in the allocation committee's work. In addition to those two recommendations, when we met in March and we heard from the small grants design team of the Small Grants Fund, they also suggested that a next step for PCL would be to create an advisory specifically to the Small Grants Fund, but it really opens up the question about doing it for all of our work. They made that recommendation based on their experience piloting some pretty key participatory elements like designing the grant application questions and scoring criteria, putting into place a non-written component to the application process, so the interviews, and then they also made funding recommendations to the committee as opposed to having staff do them. So we are looking at what we've learned from that process, taking into account those previous recommendations, and wanting to think about how we can move forward with potentially creating an advisory committee. Internally, as staff, as we've talked about it, we think that the focus of an advisory would be around PCL processes. So for example, our two biggest processes are reporting and performance and grant making. We know we're a few years out from grant making, but we are looking at how can we improve our reporting and performance work. So for example, this fall, staff is going to be working with grantees to start gathering their input around what's been working with reporting for them, what isn't, other ways we can show impact. And using content like that, for example, if we had an advisory committee, we could work with them around kind of key questions about changes to make based on grantee feedback, and we could bring those types of recommendations to you all for further consideration. We are looking internally at models like the Portland Clean Energy Fund and Preschool for All and their advisory structures, and we are trying to learn more about participatory grant making processes overall. So with that, I want to open it up to question to you all, which is what priorities would you have for the levy creating an advisory committee? Things like its role, membership, its relationship to you all.
Meg, before I think about answering that, can you tell us a little bit about, you said you were looking at Preschool for All and another org's advisory committee structure. Can you just share a little bit about why you selected those and what are the features that are appealing to you?
Yes, and I will invite Commissioner Vega-Peterson to chime in here too around their advisory committee. But as the Preschool for All has over the last, I would say almost 3 years, if I'm not wrong, Commissioner, created a participatory process to inform its entire sort of policy design. And one of the key features of that was to keep community members as well as the providers involved with the effort and other stakeholders in early childhood involved in the ongoing way in which that effort will work in our community. So they did a pretty big recruitment push this past spring for its advisory committee and kind of what its roles will be. So we haven't delved into the details, but I know that it's a standing structure that will advise how that work will occur, and that it had very specific membership and intentionality around what that membership would be and why. And then the Portland Clean Energy Fund has 4 subcommittees that advise its grant committee on different elements of its work. And I think this past winter, it concluded its first pretty large round of grant making, but it has a long way to go until it grants out all of its revenues. And they learned a lot from their subcommittee structure and thinking about how they want to make changes going forward. So it's kind of taking two local models and thinking about what we could learn from them, but then also trying to figure out what we can reasonably manage internally with our small staff, and sort of what are the types of what's the type of work that we could make meaningful for an advisory. Does that help answer it, Tracy?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Good. Commissioner Vega-Peterson, did you want to chime in at all about anything from Preschool for All's advisory work?
No, I think you did a great job, Meg. I think the only thing I would add is we actually based the model for the Preschool for All Advisory Committee on other existing advisory committees that we have at Multnomah County for things like our public health, our health clinics, just we have them in various other roles at the county that we used them on. And it was important for us to get a, I think it's like the guidelines are 12 to 15 people, and to have like a good representation from all the different people who are touched by preschool and the work that we're going to be doing with Preschool for All in different ways. So from, providers to parents to workers to labor representatives to schools to, like just trying to make sure, thinking and trying to be as inclusive with this advisory committee as we've been inclusive with creating the policy and moving it forward through the campaign.
Thank you. So other thoughts, questions?
Yeah, Meg, on the big picture, what we're always trying to do is take the wall down between the investments and the investees and the dialogue that we just experienced a little bit ago. So with this action, what is the problem that you think that we're trying to solve? What's currently not a best practice, and this would make the world a better place?
That's a great question. I'm happy to answer it, and I invite
Sure.
any of my colleagues.
And I don't want to assume any of the answer. That's why I'm asking in all sincerity to hear, because I really love what we just experienced. I think that's the action we have to keep taking. So I'd like to hear how this would add additional value. Yeah.
Sure. From my understanding from the voices that created the community engagement results and the grant making improvement results, it's more about shared power and shared decision making in our work. So rather than having our work be as staff driven as it is, and then in collaboration with you all, adding one more, I think, element of advising, voice, buy-in, accountability, other ways to inform how we do our work that are outside of our own everyday lenses, just to make sure that it's responsive to the community.
I can chime in too. I agree with everything that Meg just said. I just also want to add that I think when we have these participatory grant making processes, we can have a lot more people representing a lot more communities than we can have in a small staff that we have, or even the allocation committee. And so I think it represents an opportunity to really invite the communities that are served by our programs to shape the way that this government process goes. So it's just another way of talking about that power dynamic, but it really empowers the citizens who, are potential, not recipients from the programs, but like represent the communities that our programs serve, to really be thinking about how do we create processes where we find the right grantees to be able to really serve them well.
Did that help, Commissioner Ryan?
Absolutely. I thought it was important on the public record to have that dialogue. So that's why I asked. The language sounds good, but it's important to have dialogue so people can really understand, and we can also commit to it. I think my other comment would be that you'll experience change then. And so the staff model, if you add that, what I've experienced in my career when we make these very noble changes is that sometimes what's rough is that we check off the box because we're doing the right thing, but then that doesn't matter. What matters is how we experience the change. And so how will staff become uncomfortable perhaps with sharing that power? And that's just all. I wanted to put voice to that and make sure that we're comfortable with that uncomfortable as we go through it. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Other allocation committee members, anything else you want to add about this potential step or things you want us to make sure we're attuned to?
I think that this is Felicia. I think it's really important that you underline participatory in this advisory committee process, because it can be very common in governmental advisory commissions and committees to create what I call report out model. And what I really liked about what Erica created for the small grants process is that she created a process that was, one, transparent, two, that had buy-in from community members, and three, people came out feeling like they contributed and what they brought to the table actually mattered. And I think that's really important in whatever advisory committee that we have moving forward, is that people know what the outputs and outcomes we're asking them to be a part of, and where, as Dan says, where that change is happening. Because if we really want shared decision-making and shared power, then that participation where they are participating has to be crystal clear for them and crystal clear for the staff. And I think that is not, it sounds easy, but it's actually quite difficult to achieve. And so I just want to acknowledge it, but I am a firm believer that if we have more of these participatory advisory committees, it does allow more engagement with our levy. And so I'm all for it.
Thank you, Felicia. Your points and Commissioner Ryan's points are very well taken. I mean, I think my colleagues and I can attest that those conversations are definitely internal to us. We don't want to create extra work that doesn't have meaning, that's for sure.
Would just, the 2 points that come up for me in this conversation, one is that I think it's going to be very important, as Felicia said, to clarify what the role of this advisory committee is going to be, so that there isn't like conflict down the line where people thought they would have more authority or not, or, and I know that, because I know that some things, especially like in terms of grant making, might be outlined in the ballot measure language, right? Or, things like that we have to follow. And so, and then also the relationships of, thinking of, I'm just trying to think of like, who would be people we would run on the advisory committee in terms of their experience and wisdom that they could share. You want them to be close enough to the program to know about it, but obviously it can't be a recipient or somebody who is, a close relationship with this, recipient or something like that. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to figure out. And then obviously, whatever role or task this ends up looking like for this advisory committee, obviously, having some kind of stipend or compensation or something, because whatever input people are going to be giving in this advisory committee is going to be taking on, I think, some of the roles that we've already been having staff do, or that the allocation committee has done. And I think that just recognizing the value of people's time, that needs to be built into that.
And
Commissioner,
with the commissioner, if we could provide that stipend to value time, I agree with that 100%. And I want to note that as well.
thank you, Felicia.
I will chime in on that as well.
Okay, yeah, I think we're all in on that. So that's good feedback for staff. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you all. That's incredibly helpful.
Dan, if the only thing I think that also makes it even a little more complex is that it's just not staff and the advisory committee. We have volunteer graders, right, who create a whole nother separate layer. Now, yes, they do grade based on formulas that have been created. So I think I would just say this ties right back into all the really good comments about, let's make sure we understand, we're transparent, and we're clear about what we're asking the group to do. Would we want them to weigh in on what the grader should be grading on? Would we want them to be another layer of grading? Would we want them to, and if it was, then how specifically would the authority flow? So it's it's a great topic. It's coming up all over philanthropy. So I think it's, I'm glad we're talking about it. But because we have somewhat of a unique and complex and then constrained by the ballot measure situation, the more we talk about it up front, I think the better off we'll be to get it figured out.
Agreed. Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you. Good conversation. Meg, are you ready to take us to the summary of the allocation committee member feedback? Is that next?
Yes. Yes, I am. Thank you all for that important and helpful feedback too. So Lisa and at least one of us met with you all individually and asked for your perspectives around how staff communication has been working for you overall. And then we asked some questions around the committee's role in oversight and accountability, like anything that you wanted to see changed or improved. And then also your sort of longer term priorities for any needed PCL changes. Your overall feedback around communication was generally that you're satisfied with what we've been providing for you in advance of these meetings. One of you noted wanting to have a little bit more time to discuss staff recommendations before you have to make decisions. And another of you noted that that the committee could work on being a bit more comfortable with each other when you're disagreeing. And two of you noted wanting more visual information and pictures and videos and meetings. So I have to say apologies, because I think this is probably the least visual meeting we've had in quite some time. But the other two topics had a far greater range of perspectives. So with the committee role in oversight and accountability, two of you feel that the allocation committee should focus on programs achieving their intended outcomes and less about inputs, so less about numbers served and less about the amount of service provided or participation in those services. Two of you feel like it's important that grantees can comply with their grant agreements and that we should be reviewing data toward that end. Two of you feel that the data are important, but that we should have other ways that show impact, like stories, and that you want to understand the barriers to grantees' success. One of you wants to be sure that we're not being punitive in our oversight and accountability, and another wants us to make sure that we're working with grantees to create reporting requirements that they find useful. So in light of that kind of range of perspective, I'm curious to know what common values you as a committee share around your collective role in oversight and accountability, and how can we use those values to shape your priorities for gauging levy performance.
I think we're all reflecting on your question.
So across those, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Meg. I was just thinking, I think a lot of, what we've talked about today kind of plays in together, because I'm thinking about, we want to make the comments on grantees should comply with grant agreements and review data to collect. Like, I think that what we just talked about, the presentation on technical assistance and how to help our grantees do that, right? I think that is I think the whole thing is we want our grantees to be successful in both their programs and in complying with the Portland Children's Levy, allocation that they receive, right? And so how we're able to do that, I think that is, that's very important. I didn't make the suggestion, but I love the suggestion of we should work with grantees to create reporting requirements that are also useful for grantees. I think that's brilliant. And, and then again, it's like it's right into that phase of, or right into the vein of like wanting them to be successful in this and get something out of this that we should too. So I think this is good. And for me, even just this, what we did with hearing from grantees and having this report out from the 4 different grantees today was great. And I know you apologize that it was only hunger relief and after school, but it actually was nice to me to get like a couple different, to really focus in on hunger relief and really focus in on after school. And then maybe we could hear from a couple others, but to have that multiple organization report out gave I think a good perspective of the work we're doing in those areas. So yeah, I would just say that I think that it's hard to hit the sweet spot with reporting out and where we go with the data and the performance But I do like the suggestions that we've had. And I do think this is where we could try work in more partnership with our grantees around on their challenges and also, you know, how we can help them be successful.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I think what I would add is I think some of the learnings during this COVID moment is just the idea that our nonprofits truly are the experts. And we heard that today, you know, that they have so much expertise and their adaptations reflect that. And I agree that partnering with them so that they can help define the data that's important and helps them and lifts them up, and it's not cumbersome and just reporting for the sake of reporting. And so I think, you know, this whole idea of trust-based philanthropy is rooted in that, like really listening to our community partners, and they can help inform us, as opposed to, I think traditionally, not just here on the PCL, but in general, I think philanthropy has been the opposite in the past, where they're told what to do and how to report. So I like lifting up that trust level in this process and making some changes based on that.
Thank you, Tracy.
I see this as an opportunity to provide what I call collaborative partnership in serving our most vulnerable children. Because allocation committee members, we, of course, are the ones who fund our grantees, but it takes a lot of work to become a grantee. It's not an easy grant process. And so I think about that, and I think about the reason why the levy was created, which is to serve our most vulnerable children. As Tracy has pointed out, that they are the experts in serving our most vulnerable children, and how Commissioner Peter Vega Peterson pointed out is that we also have to have the fine balance of reporting, so that there's, of course, that accountability tool, but I think it's also a way that an opportunity to make it into a storytelling moment for what your tax dollars are being used for and how the impact is there. So when I see that part of this shared data is, yes, we have data for contractual obligations, but we also have this unique moment, especially in this pandemic, to show the creativity and the resourcefulness that our grantees did during this pandemic in the way we report out data. And so when I hear you saying that we're really far apart, what I mostly hear actually is that when I listen to what you said, Meg, is I actually don't think it's that we as allocation committee members are really far apart. I think it's more of us churning our wheels to determine how best we utilize the tax-paying resources and serve the grantees, because we feel like we are in service to the grantees as well, to make sure that they can achieve their goals. So I think that's the kind of reflection that you're hearing from us, is really sort of this thinking through of how do we hit the contractual obligations, but be able to create this sort of collaborative partnership at the same time, and be actually, I want to say, to take it one level further and be creative coming out of this pandemic. Is there a way we can change these things up, in whether we're doing reporting or we're talking about advisory committees, we're talking about all of these things coming out of the pandemic, because the children's levy pre-pandemic is not the children's levy post-pandemic as we come out. What are the things we're going to need to do to address the needs of our community as we reopen up?
Thank you, Felicia. Excellent. I agree with you that I didn't think that your range of opinions were that far apart, but I think it was an important exercise to take time to think about how to distill them into what you all just kind of put together. I hope you agree that was a worthwhile conversation. Is there any other comments that you want to add?
Sure. I really appreciate everything I've been listening to. And Felicia, thanks for saying that. Because I do think there was a shared agreement, a shared value about really just wanting to keep taking that wall down and making this not just a shared accountability 360. So it's accountability on our end as well. And I think, again, what we experienced today where we listen to the grantees come and then explain how they adjusted and adapted during this period of time. We don't know what the future brings, but that's what you always want from your investees, is to show how they're adapting. And having 35 years on the other side, thank goodness it's changing. I can't tell you how many times we had to return money because we didn't fit into the prescriptive formula of a grantee, of a grantor. And so I just think we're really being adaptable right now and providing some best practice on how to get impact. I was the one that said something about not wanting the surface data. It's really easy to embellish how many people you serve. We all know that. And too many grantors ask for such surface data. It's more about how deep and far do you go with those that you're serving. And those were some of the better stories that I heard today. So I think that when you're up here, you don't get to explain exactly what impact is. It's a shared dialogue with those that are doing the work. And it's easy to also say that they have more wisdom. The wisdom is on the ground. And so how can we keep allowing that wisdom from the ground to come up, and then for us to share that and then figure out how to scale up the wisdom that we're listening to. So I think we're on the right track, and I appreciate the way this meeting is actually rolled out and this topic coming after we experienced that kind of dialogue.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else? If not, I've got one last one and then we're done for today. All right, I'll move on. So thinking sort of ahead in terms of how the levy can respond to changes emerging out of the pandemic. In the individual conversations with you all, 3 of you noted that as Preschool for All begins to roll out, it could open an opportunity to think about the current levy investments in preschool services. And different members of you had different priorities or thoughts about the potential uses of funds like that, and just sort of any additional revenues in the future. So interests that came up were supporting 18 to 24-year-olds with career readiness and pursuits. Another member is interested in expanding the small grants fund to provide more organizations access to levy money and build capacity to support their communities. Another member is interested in supporting the emerging mental health needs and combating gun violence that's coming out of the pandemic. One member wonders how PCL could connect with the Metro Housing Bond for homelessness prevention. And then 2 of you wondered whether or not PCL should pivot priorities toward homelessness, mental health, and gun violence prevention, specifically in response to the pandemic. And one member wonders about whether or not the levy should focus its resources more narrowly for a bigger impact. And so I guess I wonder what your reflections are after hearing this, and if you have any proposed next steps for staff.
Well, I have one. The reason I was talking about the small grants pool is that there's a significant amount of organizations that will never ever be able to qualify for the big pool unless they get capacity building to get there. And what I really like about just learning about the small grants program is it really warmed my heart to know that we're building capacities of nonprofits in a way that they can serve the community, that we're bringing in new organizations to be able to serve our community, and that they still can access the levy's resources without because in the past they would have never been really able to access the levy resources except for technical assistance. And just like what Urban Gleaner said, it's a huge grant for them. And to know that we are able to provide that many food boxes in the category of hunger really just solidified to me that the small grants program for us is a huge win as the levy. And it helps us build capacity in the nonprofit space.
Thank you, Felicia. Any other reflections?
I guess there's like everything, there's some tensions that I think are good. I mean, I think we have this unspoken obligation to scale, right? Meaning that we have to touch and go, as Dan said, deep and far with as many kids as we possibly can. Sometimes that might run in, there might be some natural tension there when we talk about small grants for fewer grantees and giving fewer grantees more money. So I think this is a right discussion to have. There's probably no right answer, or surely there's no right answer. But overall, some of our programming is definitely focused on keeping kids safe and reducing harm or eliminating harm, right? But a ton of our programming is to try to create successful kids who turn into successful adults, especially those kids that haven't had and don't have the resources and access to help them be successful. And boiling, what does that mean to me? In a lot of ways, it means closing the education gap and the income gap. And I think I really feel like we do a lot of good in that area. I do feel that, with all the brain development studies that we've had for more than 10 years now, it does feel a little bit like we don't follow through. I mean, a perfect example is foster kids who, age out. And if if they're leave the home because there's no longer funding for them, they have challenged in terms, they have no financial support, maybe no even emotional support because their foster families really were temporary or short term, then we lose touch with them, and we haven't given them that boost to a better life that our programs are designed to do. So I am definitely open to thinking about programming that continues after quote unquote 18 or what, so that we, and it's not just in the foster programming, that it really relates to a lot of the work we're doing, so that these kids get a lot more soft handoffs, and I think we accomplish our mission here when we think about it like that. So that would, those are the things I'm thinking about.
Thanks, Mitch. That's really helpful.
I think go ahead. You go, Tracy.
Thanks, Commissioner. I agree with Mitch. I think that following the youth for a little while longer within the same scope. So I think to widen the scope, I'm passionate about trying to figure out how to reduce gun violence. I feel like I would want to consider that in context of a larger plan in our community. I just don't know that we would have the expertise to plug those holes, as important as it is. And so I do like going a little more deep in the areas that we've been focused on, and then making the continuum a little later into the early 20s.
I couldn't agree more. I think that if we look at where there's a real deficit, it's investments for youth 18 to 24. And I don't know any of my friends and family that allow their kid to be basically a cliff at 18. There's a lot of support between 18 and 24 when you're so blessed to be connected to a system, a family system, if you will, that provides that support to at least 24. And I don't think government and philanthropy has targeted enough on that age group. And so I know that I'm happy to hear that we're having some voices speak to that. I also think that the other point I wanted to make is because we have some new systems in place, whether it's PSEP or the upcoming, the early learning, anyway, we get to work with one another to maximize our impact. And I know that you're all working with the PSEP folks at the city, and that's really good. And so the more that we can drill down together and go deeper together for best practices, both from the earlier conversation and where investments are targeted, that's a really great idea. But I'm really happy that we're having a dialogue about the 18 to 24 gap. They don't have a lot of advocates in the government space, in my opinion. And if you look at house assists, if you look at gun violence and you look at root causes, a lot of it stems from the fact that we have too many of our youth receiving no support at that age.
Thanks, Commissioner.
I would just say, so I did want to just note that the ramp up time for preschool for all is years in the making. And so I know we're talking like we're all like very excited, like this is going to be incredible investment, and it is. But we are, we're talking about even just opening the first classrooms in fall of 2022 with 500 to 1,000 seats, and then it's going to grow from there. So we're not going to get to true universal for about 10 years. So just to put it in perspective, there is going to be a need for the Children's Levy to continue to focus on preschool, I think, to make sure we are serving the children that we want to target with, with the funds as we have been for several years. There definitely is with Preschool for All a focus on serving our priority populations first, those children who have the hardest time accessing high quality preschool in Multnomah County today. And I think those are a lot of the same populations that we're seeking to serve for the Children's Levy. But just to kind of like set when we're talking about, having funds freed up. And then I will just say, I came back from a meeting for the Association of Oregon Counties, and we were having some conversations about the impacts of COVID on our kids. And across the board, people were just talking about the mental health impacts that children have had, and we hear it again and again. And so I just really, for me, as we're looking at other areas that we may want to focus on, I think youth mental health from early childhood on is just such a huge investment, or there's just a huge need there that's worthy of investment. So I'm going to continue to put my 2 cents in for that.
Thanks, Commissioner. I appreciate all of you weighing in on that. It's very helpful. Any other closing? Oops, sorry.
I just want to say I appreciate the Commissioner Vega Peterson. The last thing we want is to do the whack-a-mole thing where, oh, we funded this, now let's go to the next one, and it appears. And I think our state has had champions in early childhood for the last 20 years, which is great. And that's why we're actually in a good status nationally on that advocacy and those investments, and we should never let up. However, we're like 51st in the country when it comes to mental health system, and our state has failed miserably. And the county knows this because you don't get enough resources that ever venture themselves into the county. So we're at a crisis. The house assist crisis has a lot of root causes, but the mental health, behavioral health, lack of support and system in our city and in our state, which is connected, is a big reason why you see a large portion of our houses population with dual and triple diagnosis. And my gut just says that there's something about focusing on the 18 to 24-year-old population that would be a strategy to help with that healing that's really necessary in our city and our state.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other closing thoughts on this? Otherwise, we're ending before 5.
I don't think anyone's going to complain to have a few minutes back. So
I had a feeling.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for a great agenda. And thank you, Meg, for stepping in for Lisa and helping manage us throughout the meeting. I want to thank everyone for joining us, those who tuned in. Our next meeting is from 3 to 5 on Tuesday, the 14th of September. That feels like a long ways away, right? Agendas will be sent to the Levy email list, shared on your Facebook page at PDX Kids Levy, and posted at portlandchildrenlevy.org. We welcome your participation in all of these meetings, and we would like you to join the next meeting to comment on agenda items, the work of the Levy, and please visit the website. I just want to thank everybody for your time this afternoon, and I really hope that you all have a wonderful summer and that you connect with a lot of children and youth. and that we continue to listen and listen and listen more so that we have a better understanding on how we can serve our children and youth. Anyway, have a wonderful summer. See you soon.
Thank you all. Have a great summer.